Hey, Impact, do you know what day it is? That's right, it's Sunday, and you know what that means. It means it is time for Impact Service, and I'm pumped and hope you are too. We have a couple quick reminders for you before we get started with service today. First, make sure to follow us on Instagram at WCL_Impact and subscribe to our YouTube channel right now. Click the subscribe button, then click the bell, and you'll get notified whenever we post something new. You don't want to miss the game show with Josh that's happening this Thursday at 6 o'clock, and you can win some awesome prizes. If this is your first time joining us, please feel free to shoot us an email at the address below, and we'd love to help you get connected. We are starting a brand new series this week called Subject to Change, and I'm actually really excited about this because I struggle a lot with change, and I'm excited to get some new perspectives on how to handle and feel about change. We are just about to head into a time of worship, and it may look a little different this week, and that's because Mike is teaching in Elevate services, so we have Eli Moore leading us, and we are super excited. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Hey Crystal Lake Impact, if we have not met before, my name is Eli Moore. I'm a worship pastor in our Willow Creek community, and I'm so excited to be leading you guys in some worship today. So I just invite you, wherever you are, whatever you're feeling right now, just carve out some space, carve out some time, and let's worship God's mighty name together.
Give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. We sing. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Oh, great are you, Lord. You give life. You give life. You are love. You bring light to the darkness. You give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. We sing. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. We worship you, Jesus. Come and fill our hearts. Give you great praise, oh Lord. We sing this out. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. Set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want more of you, God. Set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want you sing that out. Set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want more of you, God. Set a fire down in my soul that I can't contain, that I can't control. I want more of you, God. I want more of you, God. There's no place I would rather be. There's no place I would rather be. There's no place I would rather be than here in your love, here in your love. There's no place I would rather be. There's no place I would rather be. There's no place I would rather be. Here in your love, here in your love.
So I'm curious where you are today. Not physically, but I'm curious where you are with your relationship with God. And I just want, during these next few minutes, just take some time and reflect on where you are. Are you near? Are you leaning in? Are you giving all you have and leaning into the promises of God? Or are you like many and you are distant? You are not feeling energized by this whole faith thing. You are putting God and your relationship with God on the back burner. And honestly, there's no judgment. Because I'll be honest with you, that's exactly where I am. I'm having a really hard time in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of this quarantine. It's hard to lean in. It's hard to get connected. Not just with your community, but with God. And friends, I want to give you some encouragement, though, because you're not alone. You're not alone in this. And I believe that worship is going to get us through this. Worship and prayer and praising the name above all names, that's what's going to get us through this dark time. Friends, our simple response to the anxiety we face, the depression, the loneliness, whatever you're feeling, our simple response is to praise. Because God is still good through it all. He is still moving. He is still meeting you exactly where you are. He is taking what the enemy intended for evil and he is turning that for good. He is taking your current situation and he is making it into something so beautiful. You may not be able to see it now, but he is moving in and through it. And I think that is so beautiful. And our simple response during this crazy time is to praise the name above all names. Because he is worthy. He is good. He is worthy of it all. And friends, I just encourage you in this time, in these next few minutes, just to lean into worship, just to give all you have, no matter where you are, whether you are so distant today, whether you tuned in, not really expecting to get anything out of this, or whether you turned in expecting for God to meet you exactly where you are. Whether you're one of those two people, God is going to meet you and he's going to move in and through you this morning. He's going to move in a way that hits you in your core. And our simple response is to just praise. So friends, lean in during these next few moments as we sing peace, as we sing of the goodness of God. He's going to meet you exactly where you are this morning. Just lean in, friends. Lean in. Sing.
your name still. Call the sea to still, the raging me to still. Every wave at your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. We sing. Breathe, call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise, oh Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. One more time we sing. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, we sing. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Silence and never feel no. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, sing. Jesus, Jesus, we sing. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome.
Hey, Impact, it's Josh. Hey, have you ever used an app? Or have you ever maybe visited a website on the internet? Oh, really? Okay, no, so the chances are good that you've actually seen and probably agreed to something called a terms of service or a terms of use. But let's be honest, have you ever read a terms of service or a terms of use before? Well, you're in luck. Just in case you haven't read it before, here is Instagram's terms of use. Yeah, that's a little intimidating, to say the very least. Chances are pretty good that you've actually never read one of these, but that doesn't mean that they aren't important. In fact, depending on the app or the site that you're using, the terms of service could actually have a pretty big impact on how your information is collected and used. One of the things that's even more annoying than the fact that terms of service are almost impossible to read or understand, for that matter, is that they actually change pretty often. Check out this last paragraph from Instagram's terms of use. It says, "We may change our service and policies, and we may need to make changes to these terms so that they accurately reflect our services and policies. Unless otherwise required by law, we will notify you, for example, through our service, before we make changes to these terms and give you an opportunity to review them before they go into effect. Then, if you continue to use the service, you will be bound by the updated terms." Yep. We can change the terms at any time that we like, and we might let you know unless we don't have to. But in either case, if you keep using our app, then you're bound to the new terms regardless of whether you read them or not. You can be sure that terms and conditions apply, but they're also subject to change. But it's not just apps and sites that are subject to change. Life is subject to change. I think that it's actually pretty obvious at this point, but we all have our own terms and conditions or our expectations for what life should look like. And then one day, something happens that completely rearranges things on us. The rules get broken and life takes a turn for the unexpected. You see, change can actually be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. For example, all right, so say you try out for a team and you made it, but you aren't a starter like you thought you would be. You know what? That's probably a change that you can live with. But then a month later, you get injured and you can't finish out the season. Now that's a change that hits a little bit harder. Or maybe you plan on asking someone to prom, but by the time you asked them, they had already said that they would go with someone else. Again, that's a change, although it might hurt, that you can probably live with. But then you find out that prom, graduation, and literally all of school for the rest of the year is canceled because of the coronavirus. Yeah, that's a change that, I don't know, has been a little bit harder to adapt to. You see, change can be awesome or it can be awful, but even if it's good, that doesn't mean that it's always easy. You see, I think we struggle with change for a few very specific reasons. First, it forces us into the unknown. Usually before we even find out whether a change is good or bad, we have to exist in this weird limbo of just waiting to see how things are going to shake out. And I don't know if you are anything like me, but I hate the unknown. Second, we lose perspective. Change can honestly make us a bit emotional, and when we get emotional, sometimes we don't always see things around us super accurately. Third, it causes us to realize that we're not in control. And here's the thing, we work really hard at making sure that we know how things are going to work out. We study to get good grades. We practice to be better at sports so that we can win games. We take the right classes and participate in the right extracurriculars so that we can get to the right college. We like to be in control. But if you stop to think about it, I think that we all know that we don't actually have that much control in the first place. But we just seem to feel that lack of control more acutely when we're experiencing change. And since we are all subject to change at some point, we have to realize that we're also subject to realizing that we can't always make life work out the way we want it to. Because whether we like it or not, there's just no avoiding change. So instead of asking, how do we avoid change? I think it might be more helpful for us to take a look at a more helpful question. How can we make it through change? You see, fortunately, the Bible has a lot to say about change. And there's a lot that Scripture can offer to help us carry through literally anything that life throws our way. But before we get there, let's get a little backstory first. So, way back in the Old Testament, thousands of years ago, God chose a group of people called the Israelites to be his people. And although God is perfect, the Israelites, since they're people just like you and me, well, they're not perfect. So God gave them a set of laws that we now call those laws commandments that would help them live differently, different than any other people group in the entire world. And it was a way for them to kind of set themselves apart with the goal of ultimately being holy just like God is. Now they started with 10 commandments, and you've probably heard of these. You know, don't murder, don't steal, observe the Sabbath, so on. But soon, because I think we have a tendency to actually make things more complicated than they need to be, those 10 laws turned into 613 different laws, and they were expected to follow every single one. There were laws for what they could and couldn't eat, what they could and couldn't wear, and especially how they were supposed to worship God. And those rules for worshiping God were strict, to say the least. Then fast forward a few centuries, and God shows up as a real flesh and blood person, Jesus. He taught people how to live. He shared amazing truths, and ultimately made it very clear that God's love wasn't just for the Israelites, but that it was for everyone. And this was a game changer. He even went so far as to tell people that those 613 commandments could really be boiled down into two very simple ideas. That we should love God and that we should love everyone always. But then, like we talked about last week, Jesus died and resurrected. But then a few weeks later, he went back to heaven. So imagine you're there and someone tells you that instead of 613 rules, now there are only 2. And then that person leaves. Now at first, that sounds awesome. But like we said earlier, we don't like change, and then we have a tendency to make things more complicated. There were questions, there were misunderstandings, there were fights. It was honestly getting a bit ugly, and that's where the book of Hebrews comes in. It's a letter written to the Israelites who had decided to follow Jesus. And while we're not exactly sure who wrote it, it's clear that the author had a deep understanding of God's plan for his people and for all of humanity. At the end of their letter, the author of Hebrews says this in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. Keep your life free from love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Now, I know at first that doesn't really seem like it applies, but again, you have to know a bit of the background. You see, the Israelites that had decided to follow Jesus were really taking a huge risk, especially when it came to their livelihood, because their decision to follow Jesus, many Israelite Christians were suddenly seen as outsiders who just didn't belong. And that very quickly meant that many of them lost their ability to provide for themselves and for their families. But in this passage, the author is reminding them that no matter how much things change, God will never abandon them. It's almost like they're saying, a lot is changing, I get that. But God's character hasn't changed at all. The author continues a few verses later in Hebrews 13, verse 8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. In other words, even though Jesus had completely changed the game, Jesus himself had not changed. Everything about their lives was changing. Suddenly, there were no more rules about who could and who could not enter the temple to worship. Suddenly, God's Spirit was available to everyone instead of only a select few. Suddenly, sacrifices were no longer necessary to be forgiven of your sins because Jesus had made a permanent sacrifice for everyone's sin. To us, these changes may seem like great ideas, but remember, people generally don't like change, especially not at first. So the writer of Hebrews is reminding readers that in the midst of all the change that they're experiencing, Jesus is a constant that will never change. And that's what I think we need to hear today. Life changes. God doesn't. Now remember, pretty much everything in our lives is subject to change. And just because everything can change Doesn't mean that it always will, but sometimes, like right now in the midst of Illinois' stay-at-home order, it seems like everything is changing at once. And when you find yourself in that type of situation, you have two choices. You can focus on what's changing, or you can focus on the one who is constant. One of the best ways to do this is to think back and remember a specific time when God was constant for you. Maybe it was when your family didn't have enough money and you prayed for help to get through it. Or maybe it was when he was there for you when you were going through a difficult breakup. Or maybe he was there for you when you were feeling really anxious, or maybe he answered a really important prayer. I actually want to challenge you to take the next 60 seconds to think about a time in your past when God stayed the same even though the rest of your life didn't. And as soon as you think of something, I want you to write it down and then put that piece of paper somewhere where you're likely to see it again and again, like on your bathroom mirror or just somewhere in your room. Seeing small reminders each day will help you see things more clearly when life feels like it's spinning out of control. Impact. Change is going to happen. Sometimes it will be good and sometimes it won't. But even though life can be unstable, we can always trust in the one who is stable. Remember this. Life changes. God doesn't.
Impact, I loved getting to be with you today. This topic of change is a hard one because we've all experienced change and we're going to continue to experience it in our lives. And I don't know about you, but the thought of change causes some anxiety and fear within me. And Josh challenged us to think about a time in our past when God stayed the same, even though the rest of our lives didn't. I wrote down high school. And see, I moved right after my sophomore year of high school and to not only a new city, but an entirely new state. And that was really hard because literally everything in my life changed. But God was with me the whole time. And looking back on that, it's actually really comforting. So what is a time in your life when you experienced change, but God stayed the same? Maybe you're experiencing that right now. Impact, remember, life changes, but God doesn't. It can be hard to believe that, but it's so true. We're praying for you and we love you, and we'll see you next week. Bye.